welcome back to everybody who was with us last week. And if you're joining Office Hours for the first time, thanks for being here. Welcome. My name is Melissa. I'm program lead at Iterative. I have Hsu Ken here, managing partner at Iterative. And we are wrapping up week 2 of the validation program, which is about halfway through the program. A quick recap of this past week. So everybody received materials for modules 3 and 4 earlier this week. In these modules, we did a deeper dive into 2 of the 3 components needed to run a validation experiment. So the 3 components are 1, generating traffic, 2, communicating your idea, and 3, measuring interest. And we focus on the first 2, generating traffic and communicating your idea. Module 3 was all about generating traffic. Hsu Ken took us through 4 main channels that are commonly used to drive people to where you want them to go. These 4 channels are paid marketing, outreach, community, and hustle. He kind of talked through the pros and cons of each of these and shared the business types that are suitable for each of these as well. We also, in the last video of module 3, Hsu Ken also shared 5 different startup ideas and talked through like how he would generate traffic for each of these ideas. So it was kind of a real world application of generating traffic. If you haven't watched that video in particular, would definitely encourage you to. Module 4 was all about communicating your idea. So in this, we explored a few different channels for how you could communicate your idea. The first one being building a website, second one, creating sales material, email outreach and messaging. And then the last, but certainly not the least valuable, is talking to people. Module 4, we also introduced a concept that we call progressive learning. So this is where you communicate your idea in increasingly more detail as you kind of funnel people through these different channels. So one example of this would be in an email, you can share 1 or 2 points about your startup idea, but in that email, you drive them to a website where you can talk about your idea in more detail. And then maybe after the website, you get on a call with the person and you're able to talk in much more depth about your startup idea. So this is kind of progressive learning in a nutshell. We covered a lot this week, so excited to dive into questions that you might have about the module material. Thanks, Hsu Ken, for putting the Slido link in the chat. Before we get into questions that you all have, I actually want to start with a question that we have for you. So we understand that this is not school, you're not being graded on the validation program, you all are managing your own time, but we wanted to just get a sense of who has completed modules 3 and 4, just to give us context as we go into questions. Again, like, we're not here to reprimand you or anything, but I'm going to launch a poll right now. The poll is completely anonymous. So definitely feel free to be as honest with us as possible. It's totally fine if you haven't watched the modules. We're here to help you answer any validation questions that you have. But this just gives us more context as Hsu Ken as we start getting into these questions, and Hsu Ken answers your questions for you. So thanks to everybody who is participating right now. Let me just wait a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds, actually. We have a good turnout, maybe 1 more second. 3, 2, 1. All right. Can you see this on the screen?
Nope.
Might just take a minute.
There you go.
Okay, so we have about half of us who have watched all of the videos from module 3 and 4. So you're coming in with a lot of good context. 15% have watched more than half. So you're going through the modules, you're on your way there. That's great. 10% have watched less than half. You're kind of getting started, no worries yet. We have about 20% who haven't watched any yet, but plan to after today's session, which is also totally fine. We also have some folks who are not going to watch the modules. You're just here for the office hours. That's fine, but also would encourage you to watch the modules because we go far more in depth in the modules than we do here. Any questions, comments, reactions, Hsu Ken?
Higher than I thought. Feel like people are either much better doing homework or they're saying nice things, responding with nice things.
Yes, agreed. Hopefully you all are being honest. For people who have watched the videos, feel free to put into the chat, like if you found anything particularly interesting, insightful, or if you found it like not helpful, we want to hear that as well. So we can like continue learning and reiterating, iterating on these videos to make them as helpful as possible. Okay, thank you for indulging on this. All right, let's get into the questions. All right, so as questions come in, just remember that I will be prioritizing questions related to validation. And if you see any questions that you find particularly interesting, feel free to upvote, and I'll also take that into account as we go through these. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see this, Hsu Ken?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this first question. I'd love to hear more about different channels to bring traffic or to generate traffic to ideas. Any advice on localizing to Singapore? Anything specific to do differently here? So it's about generating traffic and localization.
Yeah, so I list kind of like quite a number of kind of like ways to do this, I think, as part of the video. And so I would go back there and take a look at those. And so I don't know, I probably list like a dozen or more. There's lots of different ways to do this, and there's different types. Actually, just let me pull up my notes from this, and I can just talk about the types really quick. And so there's a couple of types here. There's paid marketing, which is online ads, Facebook, Google. There's also kind of like direct marketing, like you can do direct mail, you can put up flyers. There's lots of different stuff. Outreach, community, and hustle. So those are kind of the 4 buckets that I talked about. Any advice on localizing in Singapore? You don't really need to, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of the things that we talked about work in Singapore. There's kind of no real kind of like there's no real need to kind of like localize it unless, I don't know, you're working on something special. Like the only thing that comes to mind that you might be able to kind of take advantage of is like HDBs are like a big deal in kind of Singapore. And so if you're kind of like targeting kind of like people of a certain demographic and stuff, I've seen people kind of like who do that. Like we had a company who was making a fintech app for helpers. And so they targeted kind of private condos and especially of expats because those are the people who typically have helpers in Singapore. I mean, locals do too, but they just target it. So I don't think Singapore is particularly kind of unique in kind of like how to kind of like change how to think about this. There is some kind of cultural differences, but they more or less kind of works the same. If anybody has, and I'm curious too, as I'm answering these questions, if you guys have different takes on it or you're like something, like put it in the chat. I'm like happy to kind of like see. I don't know everything, right? I'm just telling you what I think.
Yeah, and if people want to jump in, feel free to jump in too. Like go ahead and unmute yourself, jump in with any insights that you might want to share with the group. All right, let's move on to the next question. For B2C, when doing customer to understand pain points, how do you set up the right metrics to know if you're solving a pain that is big enough?
I think the question here is when you are talking to customers or when you're kind of testing your idea around a customer. So maybe I'll tackle this 2 ways. So if you are talking to customers about the pain point, it's really hard to know whether it's kind of like big enough is kind of hard to define, I think, in kind of like is maybe the kind of the place to go. So when you're talking to customers, the thing you want to look out for is kind of how animated do they get about kind of like some problems. So something that I always kind of like to do is I'll just start talking to them about their problems and stuff. And if something is really painful for them, they'll like get a little bit more animated and talk about it. And so you can kind of pick up stuff there, but that's not really like a metric. So I think when you're talking to customers, you're looking at more qualitative stuff than kind of metrics. if you're trying to get quantitative stuff, i.e. metrics about whether a problem is kind of like big enough to solve, then I think what you're just looking for is like a lot of stuff that we're kind of like talking through. I think it'll get wrapped up in the next kind of couple modules and stuff, but you want to be able to like see like how many people will click on an ad, how many people will go to a landing page, how many people will sign up for the landing page, like all of this kind of stuff. And so you're seeing like how deep their interest is. But you know, there's no way to like know for sure whether it's kind of big enough. I think the thing you want to focus on early on is just like, is there some number of people who like feel this pain enough to like talk to you, give you their emails, sign up for something, I don't know, like all of that kind of stuff. But it's an entire kind of like journey. So hard to kind of like say kind of right off the bat. But as you see, you'll see in future modules, I talk about kind of like you want to construct this entire kind of funnel and configuration and that kind of stuff. And then you'll get a better sense of this. So more to come.
Awesome. This next one, what do you think about SEO as a traffic channel? It wasn't included in the list of 4 traffic channels in module 3, but I heard a lot about SEO being a great channel.
Not really for validation. And the reason why not really is because SEO takes a long time. So SEO is really valuable as a growth channel, but it typically has a long payback period. So if you are like writing a bunch of content for validation, it doesn't make that much sense because writing content takes a lot of effort. And then you're gonna have to wait a couple months before the SEO kind of like kicks in, if it ever kind of does kick in. So I don't think it is great for validation, but it is great as like a growth channel for like existing startups and that kind of stuff.
Mm. Awesome. And if anybody has like, these are anonymous questions, but if you have follow-up, if this was your question, or if you're interested in this, you have follow-up, just let us know in the chat. All right, this is a common question that is addressed in module 1, but I'll let you take it here as well, Hsu Ken. What constitutes as a good threshold number for B2C validation? For example, if 10 people have the problem and are interested, does that mean it's good? How about for B2B?
Okay, so I talk about this. I feel like I should just say this as like my mantra through every single module in validation. There is no number that will tell you whether it's good or bad. I hate to break it to you guys. If there was, this class would be really short. This course would be really short. I would just be like, you know, get 10, you're good. You have $1 billion idea. Let me invest. It's not the case. So there is no number here. And if there was a number, 10 is definitely not the number. I can basically convince 10 of my friends to do basically anything, I think. And so certainly that isn't kind of like constitute kind of like validation for a thing. So I think the thing you want to kind of like focus on more is setting up this kind of funnel and the landing pages and that kind of stuff, and trying to drive as many people to kind of get those signups as possible. What I say, and I'm skipping way ahead to the module where I try to give some numbers to kind of give some level of guidance, is let's say you're doing paid marketing and you have a landing page and people are signing up. If you can get somewhere between 3 to 5% click-through rate on the ads and 3 to 5% sign-up rate on your landing page, and if you're getting dozens of people to sign up a week, and furthermore, you can grow the number of signups a week by somewhere between 7 to 10% every week, not cumulatively, then you seem to have momentum, is what I would say. Momentum does not mean that it is kind of like, yes, for sure, this is going to be a good idea, but you're like headed in the right direction. For B2B, I would say something like it's something like you're probably doing cold outreach, like emails, LinkedIn messages, all of that kind of stuff to people. If you're getting, 10 to 20% of them to respond to you, and then 5% of them will get on a call with you, then I think you're like in reasonable shape. But again, it's just kind of momentum. You never know for sure. And again, just to kind of make this very clear to everybody, as a startup founder, you're constantly validating, because in the beginning, you're validating that some small number of people want your product. And then as you kind of like get a little bit further on, you're validating that a larger group of people want what you're working on. And then, in the Series A, you're like, a lot of people want what I'm looking for. And so you're just kind of moving up the like ranks and levels here. So nothing will tell you for sure. Which, by the way, is why lots of people end up working on startups, and then it turns out that the problem wasn't kind of like big enough. And the reason why is because sometimes you have to kind of like put in a fair bit of work to kind of figure it out. I think my second startup, I think about it as it was a problem that a small group of people had, but it ultimately was not a problem that a lot of people had.
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, so it was basically Tinder for professional networking. I say that we got 10 million swipes. And then I found out that it wasn't that big, right? So, you know, you will find it, by the way, 10 million swipes, went through YC, raised millions of dollars, like 100,000 users or something like that, and then found out it wasn't like that big of a problem. It only really worked for people who are interested in startups, right? Like the average person who like worked at their like local bank, at the end of the day, just wanted to go home. They weren't trying to like network every day. And so even at hundreds of thousands of users and 10 million swipes and all of that, turned out it wasn't that big of a problem. So you're just trying to validate enough so that you can invest a little bit more time, and then validate a little bit more, invest more time, and so on and so forth. So that's all it is. And by the way, we couldn't have figured out that that idea wasn't going to grow past that without having gotten as far as we got. There was nothing we could have done in kind of the earlier days to like have known for sure. So it's hard.
No right answer.
No right answer.
All right, this next one is a bit philosophical,
Ooh.
as they state.
Oh, as they state.
Yeah. Are serial entrepreneurs able to have
great
repeated
question.
successes because they're actually great at validating their ideas?
This is a great question. Okay. I think serial entrepreneurs are able to do repeated successes for a couple of reasons. One, they you want to think about the whole process, the whole startup process, kind of like probabilistically. So you never know for sure that you're going to like win. You never know for sure. But what you're trying to do is increase the odds in your favor. So good serial entrepreneurs with repeated successes, what they're able to do is they're able to generate lots of startup ideas. So first of all, they can generate a lot of ideas. They have a good way to kind of like mentally kind of pick out what ideas seem more promising than others. And then they have a really methodical, effective, and efficient way to validate the ideas. So if you kind of like think about it, let's say you are just starting out as a founder, you may come up with like 2 ideas, and then you kind of don't really know how to validate the ideas. You don't really know how to filter them out. So you try to validate both ideas. It takes you like 3 months, right? Cool. In 3 months, you validate 2 ideas. Repeat founders can come up with like 25 ideas, stack rank the 25 ideas based on kind of like how interesting or promising they think they are in their head, and then pick 5 ideas at a time and validate all 5 of them like in 2 or 3 weeks, and then like rotate out ideas. And so if you can do that at that level of scale, you're just increasing the probabilities that you're like able to kind of find something, because, you know, while some people are working on 2 ideas every 3 months, you know, repeat founders can work on like 20 something ideas in kind of like 3 months. And so part of that is they get really good at kind of validating ideas. They have a framework for it and a process and all that. By the way, the whole framework that I'm explaining in the modules is how we do it. Like that is the way that we kind of done that. And so what I'm explaining in the modules and in this course is our way of validating ideas. And we will validate kind of like 3 to 5 ideas kind of like in any given week, and then compare them against each other. And so, you know, the modules are not just like, oh, theoretical, I thought this is how it was. It's like us having gone through a lot of validating. I think in my, gosh, like 15 or 18 years doing startups, I probably have worked on like probably over 50 ideas, I think, at some point, right? And by the way, most of those 18 years I actually spent working on one idea. And so a lot of the trying comes in the first like 3, 6, 9 months of just like churning out ideas and trying to validate them. So that's helpful.
Great. This next question, what advice do you have for non-software entrepreneurs starting out? And this person gives some context. They study in the US. They have a product that that's sold in the US, and they want to sell it in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. This happens a lot, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys all know the story of Grab and Gojek, but basically the Grab founder and the Gojek founder were the same. They were schoolmates at Harvard Business School together, saw Uber. One was Malaysian and one was Indonesian, and then went back to their home countries and copied Uber. Like, that's how it happened, right? The side story, which I don't know if is like, I don't know if anybody confirms or they'll ever admit to it, but they had a handshake deal that Grab would never go into Indonesia and Gojek would never leave Indonesia. And so it was a handshake deal that they would never do it. And then I think Grab broke it or whatever. And then, you know, whatever, the rest is kind of history. But there was a handshake deal apparently that they would never kind of like compete against it. Okay, so this happens quite a lot, kind of like all over the place. So nothing kind of like, obviously it kind of like works. It's worked in a lot of places. So nothing weird about this. It's a good idea. The thing that you want to think about here is not everything that sells in the US is appropriate for somewhere like Kazakhstan. And so you want to kind of think about what you are building and whether people in Kazakhstan need that or not. And if they don't need it, then obviously kind of like don't sell it in Kazakhstan. And so you want to think about that. And the other thing you want to think about too is kind of the level of kind of like development in the country. And so like one of the things that my friend was saying, this was years ago, he was moving to Vietnam because he wanted to start a robo-advisor for Vietnam. So he moved. I didn't talk to him for about 6 months. I saw him again. I said, hey, how's the robo-advisor in Vietnam going? And he was like, oh, I know, I'm not doing that anymore. And I was like, why not? And he was like, they don't have online brokerages yet, right? So like you can't do a robo-advisor unless people are like buying like equities kind of online. They don't have that yet. So they're working on that. So I think this is it's a fruitful way to look for ideas to work on in kind of like your native countries and stuff. But you just want to make sure that the idea and the problem that you're solving makes sense for your local country, and that kind of like, I think like the maturity of the country is kind of like ready for it, right? So I think about those two things, and I think you'll be in reasonable shape. If whoever asked this question, if you, well, don't worry about people stealing your ideas. I also, you know, it's only 20 people on this call anyway, but whatever the idea is, if you want to put it in the chat, I can kind of like, we can talk about it a little bit, but yeah, that's what you want to think about when kind of like bringing ideas over from other countries.
Awesome. Oh, it's also Lezek. All right, this next question. Where to get data set for total addressable market if I'm targeting a market in Indonesia? Is there free or paid data?
I'm sure there's free and I'm sure they're paid. I kind of don't care about, like, I personally don't put stock in any of them. They're just research projects that people have put on. I know a lot of VCs try to like talk about total addressable market, but when you're starting out, like, just don't pay that much attention. Like if you think about the very big ideas that have kind of like existed and stuff, they started when there was no total addressable market, or at the very least there was like no data on it. And so there's free versions of this. You can definitely get paid versions of it. But my next question to you would be like, why are you getting it? And why is that kind of important to you? I much prefer kind of the bottom up approach, whereas like you are actually thinking about a problem that you're kind of like solving for people. You are talking to those people. You're trying to figure out how many of those people are kind of out there. And then you can kind of extrapolate from there. So I think I'm much more focused on the problem and the people you're solving it for. And then that will dictate the market size than, I don't know, some person who was paid too much money at McKinsey and is like, I don't know, made some report on it. Sorry, McKinsey people. I love you. Not really, but I have nothing against you.
All right. Sheilin, if that's how you say your name, sorry, but you raise your hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to jump in here.
Yeah, hi Melissa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi Hsu Ken, thank you so much for hosting the sessions and your events. Yeah, I really appreciate learning from you. So I think my question is related to this, especially this question, and also what you just mentioned, Hsu Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait, can you see me? I think just
yeah.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So okay. So I think my question, I'll break it down into two parts, right? So first part is like, the question was talking about the total addressable market, right?
Yeah.
So market size. And I'm just curious, when you talk about some ideas, right? Let's say the nature of the idea is rather not as the typical ways that you use conventional methods that you can test, right? And let's say if it's like, so I think two subparts here would be like, first of all, like, let's say you don't have exact traditional methods that you can exactly measure, but I think you can kind of benchmark against traditional methods to kind of measure them. So example, I'm trying to think of an example here.
But by the way, I would push you because I have not met an idea that I can't figure out a way to test.
Yeah.
Right. So I
yeah.
mean, I don't know what your idea is, but I would push you and be like, I think there's a way to do it, right? Whether traditional or non-traditional, I don't, you know, but I think there's a way to kind of like get at it.
That's why I'm asking you. So it's like example, like okay, if you think about an analogy like Airbnb, right? When they first started, it wasn't clear, right? First of all, because they had a thesis that was just against, it was just challenging the norm, right? So okay, imagine the idea has a nature somewhat like that.
Yeah.
So you would naturally anticipate that there will be a huge fraction of people who will not believe in that notion in the first place. And
by the way, I know how they tested it.
Okay, tell me.
I know how Airbnb tested it, right? So I don't know if you guys all know the Airbnb story a little bit, but the Airbnb story is that the two of the founders were designers, and they were trying to go to this design conference in the US. Sorry, this is how they came up with the idea, and this is how they tested it. Trying to go to this design conference. And basically all of the hotels were booked out in that city for the conference. And this happens in San Francisco a lot. And so they came back home and they basically were like, okay, for the next, I think it was like an Apple event, like one of the big Apple events, which always happen in downtown San Francisco. They said, let's rent out our like living room with like an air futon basically. And so they posted it on Craigslist is what they did. And they posted it on there to see if anybody taken it. And it's because Craigslist had a like lodging section. Melissa, you probably know this too, but like Craigslist had a part where you could find apartments, but it also had short-term stays. And so this kind of was happening a little bit for Airbnb. And so they posted it there and honestly couldn't believe that somebody signed up to sleep on the like air mattress in their living room in San Francisco. The person actually paid, the person actually showed up, and they were like, oh, is this like a thing? And then they just started renting out their living room like every week. And then they started convincing their friends to rent out the room, and they just kept listing it on Craigslist. And so they just used Craigslist basically is what Airbnb did. Now, your point about total addressable market, and I hope this is kind of answering your question. Airbnb is actually easier to do because you could make an argument that hotels exist in the world. That is a really big market. So oftentimes when you are thinking about ideas and you're thinking about addressable markets, you're doing one of two things. You are either taking market share away from an existing kind of like market, which I think Airbnb is kind of like in that category, or you are creating a new market or expanding a market that is used to be quite small, right? So for example, I feel like the taxi industry was a real thing all over the world, but with the advent of Uber and Grab and stuff, that market is like way bigger. Before Uber, I never took taxis ever. Now I feel like I take them all the time, right? So I think you can kind of think about this as like Airbnb actually, I think was like took some business away from kind of like hotels and that kind of stuff, right? Maybe kind of grew it a little bit, but mainly kind of took it away. So do you think of your business as taking business away from kind of existing kind of people, or you think it's expanding a new market?
Here, give me a few seconds.
Yeah.
I think first of all, taking the business, especially, and then second of all,
take your time.
Expanding the market. Primarily the first one. Second one would be slightly, I can kind of think of like the next, let's say 10 years or 20 years, maybe 15 years. Like, I think that can also be the plan.
Yeah. No, look, and I think that's totally fine. So if you are taking market share from an existing kind of like market and business and stuff, then, you know, again, I like don't care about total addressable market. And like we never look at it in pitches, and I don't know. Like investors don't really ask me about this, but it's pretty easy if you're taking market share from people because you can just cite that market, right? And so look, if I'm Airbnb, the market I cite is like, this is how many people stay in hotels in America on an annual basis. This is how much revenue they are. And like, I think I can get 10% of that or whatever, right? And so conceivably in Airbnb's wildest dreams is like we replace all hotels or something, which was never going to happen. But like, that is kind of like the total kind of like part, right? So it's easier if you're kind of thinking about it this way.
Okay, two parts, right?
Yeah.
So if let's say the analogy of the Airbnb, so like that kind of involves a certain aspect of like.
Do you want to just tell me what you're working on? I can then just help you directly.
Is this recorded?
It is recorded. Let me say something
Oh.
about ideas, because this is something that a lot of founders are. I know when it starts out, you feel like your idea is really precious and you can't tell anybody. But the thing that you learn, at least this is like how everybody in San Francisco thinks about it. And by the way, you should make your own choice. If you don't want to tell your idea, don't tell your idea. The thing that people always kind of say is that, like, even if you have the best idea in the world, you have to ram it down people's throats to get them to pay attention to it. And so by not telling people what it is, you don't get feedback on it. And so you can either optimize for someone stealing your idea, which is incredibly low, like I've like almost never heard about it, or you can optimize for getting good feedback from people on kind of like what the idea is. And you should get feedback 100 times out of 100 is like our take on it. But like, it's up to you. Like, I'm not going to force you to tell us your idea.
Okay, I have a solution.
Yeah.
Can I please have a session with you after this?
Sorry, I can't do that. And the reason why, I'll give you the response that I give lots of people. The reason, we have over 200 founders now, and I prioritize almost all of my time working with the founders. So if you want to apply to Iterative, then, like if you kind of go through the process, then, maybe we end up on a call and I can talk to you about it. So maybe you should apply. That's like a hack to get feedback from us. But I don't take outside. So
there's another caveat to applying or not applying, right? Which is the second part of the question, if you don't mind, please. Like, which is like the markets, right? So I saw someone talk about Kazakhstan, right?
Yep.
And then I'm not Kazakhstan right now, but so let's say if like the scale of it is kind of global, right? Obviously you need to kind of prioritize which market, right? As your market entry. And then I think obviously you can kind of like prioritize and shortlist, right? A few that would be most probable for the demographics that you're kind of targeting.
Yeah.
But then like how? Yeah, that's why. Never mind. Yeah, because
can I make an observation? I think you're overthinking your idea and you are overly sophisticated. And what I mean by that is, don't worry about which order of companies to enter. Don't worry about the TAM 15 years from now. Literally just be like, and again, I don't know if it's a consumer idea or whatever. If it's a consumer idea, can you get 100 people to sign up for your thing?
Okay.
Right?
Yes, more than that. I'm confident, but I need to be in the right market because I think of the nature of that.
No. Don't be confident. Do it.
No. I don't feel comfortable saying because it's recorded here. So
you can email me then. I can't get on a phone call, but you can email
me. All right. Appreciate that back and forth. I am conscious.
Thank you.
And know that we have a queue of questions. So let me get to this next question in the queue. And then we also have somebody who raised their hand, so we can do that right after our zine. So this next question, what category of ideas should I optimize for if my honest goal is to make money in the next 3 to 5 years? I can work on anything, but money is the focus. Interesting question.
It's an interesting question. I don't know who this is. And unless Azreen has had his or her hand up for quite a while too. I think the way I would answer this question, by the way, is how much money are you trying to make? Because if you're trying to make like money, like something that kind of like reasonable salaries are kind of making, then I would just be like, if that's your main focus, you should get a job, right? Like if you want to make like a pretty good, like if you're optimizing for the probability of making kind of like a livable wage and kind of even a little like better than that and kind of making some like decent money, then like a job is the best way for that, right? If you really want to make like a lot of money, then okay, then you have to kind of roll the dice and be like, okay, I'm going to have a small probability of success, but if I am, then I'm going to make a lot of money, right? So I think if you're kind of like thinking in this lines, it depends on how much money you really want to make. And so I think it's, 1 to 5 million. I want to make 3, 5, 10 million. Okay. Interesting. My answer, by the way, in SF, if you want to make a couple $1 million, is basically work at a fast growing early stage startup and get their equity. It is the best risk adjusted way to make that amount of money. And so I have some friends who just like hopped around like pre-IPO into this. And so it was like an interesting thing to do. That does not exist here. And I don't think that's kind of the best way to kind of like make it. if you want to make that amount of money, you could also think about doing lifestyle businesses, by the way, because then you like increase the chances of it working and then kind of like pocketing a lot of the money. Like lifestyle businesses won't make you like 50 million or like 100 million, but if it's a couple million, like it's possible. Like I have some friends who run lifestyle businesses and, you know, they're worth a couple $1,000,000. Okay, but I'll try to answer your question. Category of ideas. So a couple $1,000,000 actually means that you don't need an idea that is that big, if I'm being honest. Right? Like it doesn't need to be $1 billion idea. It doesn't even need to be $100 million idea. Like, I don't know, if you own 40% of a $50 million idea, like you're kind of like way kind of like above that already. So the idea doesn't need to be that big. I would probably then pick what category of ideas? I mean, do fintech, I guess. Like fintech ideas are kind of like, they are very much in need in Southeast Asia, and they're kind of straightforward. They're not straightforward, but they're like clear way to kind of make money and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I would pick some kind of risk-adjusted way to kind of like work on fintech ideas probably, but I don't think you actually need a venture-backed idea in order to kind of like do this. And again, I don't know what your background is, but like, also I guess in 3 to 5 years, hard to make a couple million 3 to 5 years, I guess. But you know, I would probably work on some fintech idea or something like that. You could try to clone ideas before they get to Southeast Asia and then, I don't know, get bought by the person who kind of did this. I have a friend who like cloned Airbnb in Asia before Airbnb came, and then cloned, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but hard to say.
All right.
How do I make $5 million in 5 years is basically the question.
Yeah. We all want to know that.
We all want to know.
Yeah. Some good ideas though, Hsu Ken.
Yeah.
Ezrin, you've been very patient. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question? And then we'll get back to the queue.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Hi, Hsu Ken.
Hello.
Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit background about our business. We are in the food service business, and we customize meals for people who face health challenges such as cancer, diabetic, and cardiovascular disease. So in the past couple of months, we have been validating the idea, because we are bringing the hot food preparation into a RTE, ready to eat meal bento. So I've been talking to doctors, dietitians, nutritionists, as well as some of our existing clientele. So the feedback was, yeah, you know, this is very much needed by our community. Plus, lifestyle diseases are kind of increasing from a statistic standpoint. So my question is this validation, i.e.
Nope.
talking to them, sufficient, or shall I look into like another area or aspect in terms of validation? Yeah.
You should try to sell your product. Like, what is the actual product?
Sorry. We have been in this service industry for about 5 years. So all this while, we prepare hot food. So which means like today cook, today deliver.
Yep.
But what we are going to do in terms of product wise would be RTE, clinically tested, diabetic friendly, a few categories, by the way, but we're going to launch with 2 categories first.
Wait.
Then
Simply, you make food and deliver it to people with diabetes?
Yeah, cancer as well as cardiovascular disease.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would make a landing page that says you make this food, and put how much it costs, and then have people sign up, and see how many of those people that you can sign up. And then for the people that sign up, I would email them and be like, hey, I can deliver this food to you. Like, this is how much it costs. Like, pay me now, basically. Right. And so that's real validation to me. Like, and again, this is something I talk about in kind of a lot of the modules. I don't put much stock in asking people whether they would do something. I set up a situation and then see if they will do it. And so I would do that, right? Like, make a landing page, like do that, and see if people actually order from you, right? And similarly, if you are talking to people and doctors and that kind of stuff, be like, hey, I made this page where people can order this food. Will you recommend it to your clients and customers and that kind of stuff, right? And see if they will actually do it or not. A lot of people say they will help you, and then when you actually kind of be like, okay, now's the time, help me, you'll see if they actually do or not. And so if these people do help you, you do get people signing up, and you get people who are actually ordering this food or something like that, then that's like real validation that like people want this, right? And so that's what I would do. I would just start kind of like selling it. And you know, yeah.
Okay. So if I hear it, it's kind of like having a proper channel to gather the validation feedback, right? Like a landing page, you know, or even blast it out in our Facebook page,
Yeah.
you know, hey, we are, you know, coming up with this new product, you know, sign up or something like that, so that from there we are able to see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're me, I don't even say that we're like, it's coming out. I'm like, it's out. Get it right now, right? Like, that's the thing I tell people all the time is like, this exists right now. Like, do you want it or not? And I talked about this in one of the modules, but I think you get better data if you tell people that something kind of exists and see what they do, right? And if people believe that something exists, but don't sign up for it, you making it exist does not change anything about whether they would have signed up for it because they already thought it exists. Now, if they think something exists and it doesn't exist, but they sign up for it, then all you got to do is make it exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Which is like, great.
Yeah.
Like, I can do that. Right. So tell people it exists, see what they do, and then, you know, you can kind of like do that. Right. And I know sometimes people, especially people are maybe entrepreneurs for the first time, they're a little bit squeamish of like, oh, am I like lying to people and kind of doing this kind of stuff? I guess maybe technically a little bit, right? But like, it's really kind of the best way to do it. I've never had anybody kind of be upset with me. Like, if I charge people money for something that I'm not going to give them, I just refund the money back. I just wanted to know whether they would pay me or not. And so I think if you're just clear with people, it's totally fine and kind of like, okay. And look, most of the time they're just excited. Like, somebody will sign up and I'll be like, hey, I'm not quite ready yet. You know, we're working on the food. I think we'll be ready in the next month. Like, you know, I'll email you then. They're like, okay, great. Like, I would love to be in the first part. So that's what I would do.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Hsu Ken. Thanks.
Cool. Good luck. Millen also has a hand raised. Melissa, you run, but you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I have some kids out there playing. Let me go back to the queue and then we'll get to Milan. So we're kind of doing alternate. All right. So this next question, we ran ads for 5 days to test with 11% conversion and 40 signups. 40 people want to pay now and take the course. We have no course yet and no bank account. Now what?
Awesome. I mean, I don't know what the question is here, but like, this sounds great, right? Like, for everybody that's kind of here, you ran ads for 5 days, you got 11% conversion, 40 people like signed up. That means 40 people like thought this was real and kind of wanted to do it. I don't know whether they actually paid or not. Wanting to pay and actually paying are kind of like different things. And so I doubt that all 40 people are going to actually pay, but like, even if 10 of them pay, like, that's promising, right? I'm going to talk about this in different modules and stuff yet, but the thing I would do with the people who are kind of interested is I would start trying to get on calls with them and start emailing them, start talking to them about like, and trying to learn more about them. Like, hey, why are you interested in this? What about this did you really want to do? Have you tried other things? And you're kind of doing the next level of validation, which is really understanding who these customers are. And the thing you want to, the reason why you want to do this is if you find out that all 40 people are like similar age and want to do it all for like the similar reason, then you kind of like discovered something kind of like very interesting. And you can then go like figure out how many of those people are out there. And so like, I don't know what course it is, but let's say it's like all elderly like women and they want to do it all for the same reason. You might have just found your first kind of like initial customer segment, and you can like, I'm sure you can increase conversion and signups if you know that like the people who are really interested in this are like elderly women. And like, that's what you want to find out with a lot of validation is like, okay, who's this initial customer segment? Really understand them. Like, why do they care about this? Why are they doing this and all this stuff? So, yeah, sounds good. I mean, like, it's awesome that you did this. It's awesome that you're getting responses back. It doesn't mean your idea is $1 billion idea yet. And it doesn't mean that you validated it for sure, but it's promising.
Awesome. Hope that helped, Herdian. There wasn't a specific question here, so if you do have a specific question about this, just put in the chat and we'll get to it. Milan, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Hsu Ken. Thank you for
Hey.
answering all the questions so
Yeah.
frankly. So I started a marketplace connecting buyers and sellers of pre-owned art.
Oh, yeah.
Just to give you a bit of context, what we normally do is if someone's looking to sell an artwork, they come to us and
Yeah.
then we manually go down, we take the photos, we meet them, we
Awesome.
onboard them, and then that helps our website look really good.
Yep.
One thing is that with art, we find that there are other cities that obviously have a much more mature market,
Yep.
Far more consumers than in Singapore. And we're wondering when would be a good time to start looking into validating the product overseas as well.
Yep.
The issue is that it's expensive to ship art. So wherever we find pre-owned art, it more or less circulates within that jurisdiction or that city. So
Got it.
it would really be starting afresh
Yep.
somewhere else, and it will cost.
By the way, I just had art delivered to my house today from Taiwan, and it cost me $500 just
Exactly.
for delivery. So I know this well. By the way, this is what happens when your girlfriend used to be an art curator at a museum. Okay, so a couple of things maybe to kind of think about here. You can actually test other markets pretty easily. And I did this with companies kind of like in our batch and stuff. And so you don't actually have to worry about the shipping yet. You're just trying to verify whether there is demand or not in those other countries. And then you can worry about kind of like whether they would pay for shipping later. So kind of one thing at a time, right? So would they pay a lot for shipping, and do they want art in these countries, are kind of like two different questions. So one thing you could do is take some of the art that you have now. And by the way, you going down, taking photos and all that, very Airbnb. Airbnb found that the quality of the photos was like the most important thing. And so they just started going to people's houses and taking photos because people were bad at taking photos themselves. I would take the artwork that you think is really great that you have, and you could potentially actually start running ads with that artwork targeting other countries, right? Like, I mean, Facebook and Instagram allows you to do kind of like geolocation targeting. So you can target that, drive people in, see if you can kind of get them to kind of like sign up or like at least email you about purchasing the thing. And you can try to get a sense that way, right? And if you do that for, let's say you're in Singapore now, I would pick a variety of markets in different kind of like parts. So, you know, pick more developing markets and maybe other Southeast Asian countries, but maybe pick more developed markets like US, Japan, Australia, and some of these. And then you can compare across them. You're like, oh, okay, developed markets respond at this rate relative to other ones. You can kind of do all this stuff, and you compare all of the like numbers across each other. And then kind of, again, see what kind of responses back. Like, does anybody actually kind of like bite? Now, if you get like, let's say you get 15 people who are like, hey, I'm interested in buying this artwork. And then you're like, okay, you know, happy to sell it to you, but like the shipping is going to be $500 in my case. And they all kind of are like not interested. Okay, well then, you know, then you have to kind of figure out the shipping thing, right? And whether you can figure that out or not. But if they actually will buy it, like apparently I did in my case, then like you don't have to worry about it. So I sometimes think maybe this is advice for people more broadly. You want to decouple your problems as much as possible. And so you want to break your problems down in kind of like atomic units and then kind of like test them kind of individually. So like Milan, for you, demand is the first thing, worry about kind of like delivery kind of after that, right? And so find out if people want it first. But yeah, I would just, you could run ads. I'm sure you can work with maybe kind of like art communities in some of these countries already and kind of like try to get them to kind of push some of your stuff. But I would just try selling some of the stuff to these other countries, see if you get any bites, and then figure it out kind of like from there. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, it really does. Just a very quick follow-up. If we do find that there's actually a bit of interest in it, and obviously shipping is the issue,
yeah,
and we want it to start setting up overseas, is that something that, I mean, as someone from Iterative, would that be something you would fund? Would that be something that you would support?
Yeah, I mean, look, we fund any company that is their primary market is in Southeast Asia or their founders are based in Southeast Asia. That's it. So if I don't know, if you fit one of those two things, then like great.
I do. Great. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah. I like your art in the back, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to a question in the queue, and then I'll head over to you, Abith. Hsu Ken, I'm conscious of time. Do you have a hard stop?
No,
okay,
I'm good.
you're good. Okay. So the next question, we'll try to get to as many of these as we can. There are a couple of questions here about legal stuff. So let me just ask this one as a representative. So how to validate and accept payments without setting up an LLC or legal stuff?
Okay. I am not qualified to give legal advice. And so none of the things I'm about to say are legal advice and should not be thought of as legal advice. If you get in trouble, don't blame it on me. I just never worried about any of this. Like when I was in Singapore and like restaurants used to pay me for like, I don't know, that I would send wages to kind of like other people. So I ran this, I think I talked about it, I ran this on-demand blue collar staffing platform, blah, 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 blah. Restaurants just pay now my personal account. And then I just paid now the money to like whoever worked at the thing. Like, that's it. Like, again, it got kind of ridiculous because I was doing like tens of thousands of dollars a week and it was just coming to my personal pay now account and I was just sending it out to a bunch of people through my personal pay now. So it was fine. If you want to be a little bit more legit, you can use something like Stripe. I think Stripe will kind of like help you set all this stuff up and kind of do it a little bit more legit. But in the beginning, I didn't worry about it too much. I think the other thing that you want to make sure you're not doing is premature optimization. Like if you're assuming that like tons of people are going to do this thing, so you better set up an LLC, I might try it first. You might find out that not as many people do it. And so the thing you should be worrying about is like getting people to kind of like actually do the thing. But I know I just had people kind of like send me money and like it was all fine. Again, not legal advice. I don't know if that breaks laws where you are. You are responsible for figuring that out. But that's what I would do.
All right, Avith, over to you.
Thank you very much for hosting this event, Ken.
Yep.
The problem that we are solving is, the problem we are solving is company secretaries spend a lot of time in manual tasks like document preparation, filing, client communication. So we are building a platform to automate the manual tasks for company secretaries. So the question is, so initially I validated the idea through talking to a few company secretaries by getting warm introductions. So they were fine. I mean, like they were happy to test the tool once we have launched it live. But when I tried to cold email a bunch of secretaries, I was not able to get any sort of a response. So my question for you is like, how can I validate this, or like, isn't my idea scalable?
You just work the problem. Go figure out how to get people to respond to the cold emails is basically the trick, right? So let's say that you actually like, I mean, it sounds like you're probably working on this already, but like, let's say that you actually like, you're working on this startup and you're like trying to get it to grow. You can only get so many warm introductions anyway. So at some point you're going to have to figure out how to kind of crack this like cold email thing. And so just try to crack it now. One big part of validation is you try to solve the distribution problem even before the product problem. And I think that's a big shift for people, but that's how we often think about it. And so I would just work the problem. So a couple of things you could do here. I'll just help advice for kind of debugging, kind of nobody responding to a cold email. You want to find out if are you targeting the right people? So if you're sending a bunch of cold emails to people, it's probably true that not all those people are kind of the same. And so are there any people in that group that respond more or less than others? And can you kind of target more of those people? It could also be that email is not the way to reach kind of secretaries. And so you need to find some other way to kind of like do it. If you can find out whether your open rates are high or low, you can use tools out there that will track these open rates for you. If nobody's clicking on your email, okay, that tells you something. If they are clicking on your email but not responding, then there's likely that what you have in the email is like not compelling enough, or they don't get it, or like, I don't know, you talk about it in some way that they don't understand. And so I think you just want to start running kind of like adjustments to kind of what you're doing to see if you can increase the response rate or find a new distribution channel so that you can do it. But it's an important part of validation to figure out how to get people to respond to you who are like not warm introductions and not your friends. Because look, at some point you're going to run out of warm introductions and friends. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Let me get to a couple more in the queue. Okay, so conscious of time, I just sent a note out. If you have to hop off, we'll send out the recording. We'll answer all the outstanding questions. Appreciate everybody's engagement though. So let's try to get to as many questions as we
Okay,
can.
I'll try to rapid fire them.
Yeah. This next one, I ran an ad with $30 on Facebook and got 20 leads. A user conversation start by asking how much is this service? How do you adjust this when the pricing is not set?
I mean, you could do the judo move of like, how much would you pay for this service? Look, there's a couple of things you can do. By the way, awesome. Whenever people are actually trying stuff out, spending money on ads, getting leads, like all this kind of stuff, awesome. Like, if you're doing that and that you're like way ahead of the curve and kind of like ahead already. So whoever this is, like, awesome. Okay. I said that kind of jokingly, but it's kind of true. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can just ask them, be like, how much would you be willing to kind of like pay for this, right? And you can have a conversation about it or like whatever. And so then you get some data point of kind of like, okay, what is all the numbers everybody like says, right? If you ask that question, most people are probably going to choose a number that is cheaper than probably what they would actually pay because everybody kind of like wants a better deal, right? The other thing that you can do too is just pick a number. Like, so one thing that I've done is, let's say I'm in 20 conversations. I'm trying to figure out how much I should price my thing. I might just be like, I'm going to tell 5 people it's $10. I'm going to tell another 5 people it's $12.50. I'm going to tell another 5 people it's $15. And I'm going to tell another 5 people it's $30 and see what happens, right? See what the responses are, see if they would kind of pay you and that kind of stuff. So you can start getting a sense of people's responses relative to kind of like the price amounts. User conversations typically shouldn't start with how much the service is though. So that to me is kind of like a little bit of a, like, that doesn't sound right to me. Typically these user conversations, you want to get on and you want to ask them about their problem and be like, hey, like, you know, we're building this kind of product to solve this problem. Talk to me about your experience with this problem. How does your problem kind of like work and all of this kind of stuff. And so you want to spend as much time on these user conversations about asking them about their problem and having them talk about their problem as possible. Price might be something that comes right at the very end, but I think you want to spend more of that time there. Not strictly for validation, but if people are learning sales for the first time, this is the book we always recommend to all of our portfolio companies. Again, it's called Founding Sales. And so it's a book about how to do sales, but from like a founder's perspective. So you are, most founders are not salespeople. And I think there are some good tips there on kind of like how to do user conversations and like that kind of stuff. So hopefully that can kind of help people.
All right, this next question. How do you know you have validated a hypothesis and you stop and move on to validate and prioritize the next hypothesis?
Ooh, that's interesting. I tackle this in kind of different ways. So I think about hypotheses as like, like those, like, I don't even know if they're actually Russian dolls, but they're like hypotheses nested within hypotheses. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes you are trying to validate this like overarching hypothesis, which is like, do people have this problem and does my solution solve this problem to people, right? In order to answer that hypothesis, you need to answer like 25 other hypotheses underneath that, which is like, who are these people that have this problem? Like, do they talk about the problem in this way or do they talk about it in another way? And so I think what typically ends up happening is you try to solve the like broad hypothesis as an initial step. Based on the results you get back, you find out there's all these other hypotheses that kind of like come as that, and then you start kind of working on those. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you ask a really good question and then you work on that for a while, you find out that there's lots of other questions that you need to answer in order to answer the bigger question. And so you just start working on that. But you often don't run into those other questions or these other kind of hypotheses until you start working on the larger ones. So maybe that's how I would think about it, is like you're trying to answer a very big question. And the way to answer that very big question is by answering a lot of other smaller questions. And it'll give you a clear picture of kind of the bigger question.
Hope that was helpful to that person. Let's try to move on here. Okay. Building a platform to automate manual tasks for company secretaries in Singapore, document prep, filing, client communication, etc. How can you validate this before launch?
I'm like a broken record on it. Look, you can make a landing page. You could talk about how your platforms automate manual tasks. You can show examples of how it does it, which are all just like mock-ups and that kind of stuff. And then you can start running ads or kind of like reaching out to people who have to do these things and try to sell it to me. An interesting thing here is if you make the web page, it basically, I think we covered in this module, the communicating your idea. The web page is basically just a tool which you can communicate your idea. And then you can start showing it to people and see if people will kind of like sign up for it. My hunch is that you probably are actually not selling to company secretaries. You're probably selling to kind of like people who run company secretary companies, or people or the companies themselves, so that they can use the company secretaries at the company can use it. And so if you make this landing page, I could imagine like focusing on different groups of people, like sell to company secretary companies and see how they respond to this. Try to sell directly to the secretaries themselves, see how that works. And then try to sell directly to kind of companies to see if they would kind of like want to use it for their secretaries. But I would just act like you've already made this and try to get people to kind of sign up for it. If you want to go a step further, I would put like a Stripe payment link that is like $10 a month to like use the services or whatever, and then see how many people will pay you $10 a month. And basically everybody that pays you, like, reject it and send an email that is like, hey, I was so excited that I'm like so happy that you were excited about this. I'm sorry, we just had the like wrong setting. I didn't mean to kind of take anybody's money. We're still working on the products. Like, I'll let you know when we're kind of like ready for it, but don't worry, I refunded your money. So you can always say kind of nice things at the end. But again, the trick is like, will people sign up for this? Will people pay you money for it? And so just act like you already made it. Fake it till you make it, as people like to say.
All right, this next question came to me in the chat a while ago. So Stephanie asked, she would like to know what kind of approach suits AI marketing. So how would you generate traffic for AI marketing?
It's no different. AI marketing, regular marketing, it's all the same. Generate traffic in the same way. I'm trying to find the specific. Oh, Stephanie, okay. It's the same. I mean, look, I'm assuming you're making an AI powered tool for like marketers or something like that. It's the same. Something kind of different about it. Like, make a landing page that explains how your tool is better, how it helps people, and all of that kind of stuff, and see if you can get people to like sign up for it, and even better, kind of pay you for it. You can run ads. If you're targeting marketing people, you could do a lot of LinkedIn outreach too. So it's really easy to just, get on LinkedIn and kind of find people who are marketers. Again, if you're like content marketing, if it's a content marketing tool, find people who are content marketers by profession, start reaching out to them, talk to them about what you're doing, show them the website, see if you can kind of like get them to sign up or get on a phone call with you. So, it's the same. I don't know. It's interesting. Sometimes people think like if they're working like crypto or AI or some new thing, that it's like, oh, this is totally new, so all the rules are different. They're not. They're not different. It's the same. You're still building, you're still solving problems for people, just with new tech. That's all.
Awesome. The next question from Ash in the chat, Hsu Ken. So Ash is building an auction platform.
Yeah.
Dash. They recently completed a 4-week trial phase. The results of the trial phase surpassed their anticipations and expectations. Great job. They received registrations from over 1,700 users, most of whom verified their phone numbers. They've hosted 350 auctions, 3,100 bids, generated 900 in revenue, gained 35 subscribers. Do you think they should keep going with this platform, or any suggestions in general?
I have no idea. And I say this honestly, right? Because it's like, there's just a lot of nuance that like as part of this, right? Like, if you don't think you should go forward with it, then like, I definitely don't think you should go forward with it. So I think it kind of like depends. Like, I don't know enough about whether the auction platform, I don't know how long you've been kind of like working on it. Like, I don't know any of these kinds of things. And so it's hard for me to say whether you should continue or not. Only founders can decide. Only the founders of the companies get to decide that. Maybe the thing that, to be helpful, maybe the thing I would suggest to you is, and this is what we do with companies kind of during the batch. Can you grow the number of, not revenue, but basically kind of like your bids generate kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's bids. I'm trying to figure out what your North Star metric is, but like pick one of those metrics, and can you keep it, can you grow it 5 to 7% every week for a sustained period of time over a couple of months. And if you can do that, that is further evidence that like you probably onto something. And if you can't, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not onto something, but like, you know, you're not growing as fast as you possibly could. If people don't know this, when you, as part of our program at Iterative, that is the goal we set for all of the companies, more or less, is that you need to grow 5 to 7% every week for the entire duration of the program. If you do the math, if you grow 5% a week for a year, you will 12.6x whatever that metric is. And if you grow 7% a week for a year, you will 33x your metric. So when companies join our program, that's how fast we want them to grow. And so we set that as a target, and then we just try to figure out how to make that happen, right? Ash, hard for me to say kind of like just from those whether you should or should not continue, but I would just set goals for yourself that are based off of those targets and see what you can do to kind of like hit them. But hard for to say. I would need to know much more about kind of like, I don't know, is the market good? Is it like interesting? You know, that kind of stuff. So hard to say.
Hope that's helpful, Ash. Okay.
Thanks, so, thanks, Melissa. Thank
Of
you.
course. Thanks for asking that question. Okay, so we have about 12 questions left in the queue. So we've answered all of the validation ones. These are more general questions. Do you have time right now? Maybe like 10 minutes on this?
Yeah, why don't I just try to like rapid fire them as much as possible?
Yeah. Okay, this next one has been upvoted 7 times.
Okay.
What do you think about starting a startup in Russia?
I don't know. I don't have any opinions on this. Like, never been to Russia, don't know what's going on there. Like, you know, I have no idea. So I don't have much of an opinion. Yeah. I mean, look, if you're Russian and you live in Russia, then starting a startup in Russia makes a lot of sense, right? So, but I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah, you probably have a stronger opinion than Hsu Ken.
Yeah, you probably.
All right, this next one. I have an impression that there are VC funded motivated entrepreneurs and profit motivated. It seems that latter perform much better. Any thoughts?
VC funding motivated entrepreneurs and profit motivated. So you're saying that there are some founders who are motivated by VC funding and some that are motivated by profit, and which one is better? I mean, to be honest, I don't think either of them are kind of the best kind of entrepreneur that we like to kind of back. The ones we like to back the most are the ones that just like want to really care about getting a problem solved. And so they kind of like work on that the most. So, I mean, if I'm having to choose between these two, then profit motivated is definitely better. VC funding is like, doesn't mean anything. Like, VC funding is not an end. I mean, profit's not an end either. They're just both means to an end, right? So look, you get VC funding so that you can solve the problem that you've been working on for more people. You make profit so that you can solve the problem that you've been working on for more people. So in both cases, they're just means to an end. So I don't know. I guess if you're making me choose, yes, profit, but like neither of them are particularly important. They're just means to an end. So.
All right, this next question. Should a founder work at some particular job before founding a startup?
Nope. No, not really. Being a founder is like so unlike any job that there's no job that is really going to prepare you for it. Like I was a consultant for like 9 months before we started the company. I mean, outside of learning basic kind of like professionalism stuff, like, I don't know how to like be on time and communicate well with others, there's nothing like it. So no, there's no particular job that you should have before founding a startup. Honestly, the best way to prepare for founding a startup is to found a startup. So I think the thing that helped me the most was I just started working on a lot of like projects on the side. I just started building stuff for people and trying to solve people's problems on the side. And that was probably kind of the best preparation, but there's nothing like actually just starting a startup yourself. So if you think like working at VC is going to help you, it's not. If you think working at a startup will help you, it will more than a VC, but like none will prepare you. So I actually think most of the founders that we invest in, I don't find any commonality between any of the jobs that they had prior to starting a company. And I think some of them, like literally we invested in them right out of school. So, yeah.
All right, next question. What are your thoughts about micro software as a service?
I don't know what micro SaaS is. I'm just assuming, is this just like super high volume, low price point kind of like SaaS? If it is, I feel fine about it, right? So maybe the thing I'll say kind of more broadly is you can think about businesses in 4 quadrants in 2 dimensions. One is high volume, low volume, and the other is high margin, low margin. So obviously, if you are in a low margin business, you need to be doing a lot of volume to be able to kind of like make enough money to kind of like have a large sustainable kind of company. And if you are doing low volume, you better make enough money from each of those transactions to kind of sustain. And if you are a low volume, low margin business, you probably won't survive very long. And basically everybody hopes that they are a large volume, large margin business, but very few are. To be honest, I think it's just like Apple, Google. I think they're like the only ones, maybe.
All right, this next question, related to the program, does Iterative invest in competing companies / ideas? Rashmi, I saw your email earlier, so we can answer this question here.
Yeah, yes, we do. We didn't in the beginning, but we've invested in over 130 companies now. And so at some point we just like have no choice. Also, companies often kind of like just pivot and change what they're working on. And so, you know, sometimes companies just pivot into competing like companies that we've already invested in other programs. We do try to do something where we try to build some sort of kind of wall between them. And so if I worked with like, let's say Rashmi, that you had started a competing company with one of our other companies. If I worked with the competing company, I wouldn't work with you. Right. So you would work with one of the other visiting partners just so that we just like don't kind of like change that way. And we would obviously never pass kind of information between the companies. And so we are kind of just like completely kind of like removed from that. And look, we're investors in both of the companies. And so, you know, what we would never try to like sabotage or screw one of them for the benefit of the other. Right. We hope kind of the best company would kind of like win. And so we want to help both companies as much as possible. But yes, this is kind of unavoidable as far as.
Thank you for answering that. My question specifically came because the space that I'm working on, one of the venture partners at Iterative happens to be in a similar space. She runs a company in a similar space. And that's why my question is coming, you know, one is obviously, you know, somebody in the cohort working in a similar idea space. But another thing is, hey, a venture partner within Iterative is working in the same space. So, you know, is it advisable for me to apply to winter cohort?
Yeah. Yeah, look, by the way, most of our venture partners are like part-time kind of helping. And so they're not kind of full-time staff. But on top of that, we would just make sure that they don't get routed to you. Right. And so I think it's totally fine. If you want to be like very kind of like specific and careful of it, I put my email in there so you can email me directly and be like, this is what our company does. This is the venture partner I'm worried about. I will make sure that we kind of keep it tight.
Thank you. There's another question that I've posted, which is more specifically related to the region. So I am primarily focusing on South Asia, Southeast Asia being a part of it. Given that's the case, and I'm not based in Southeast Asia, I'm based in India. Should I go ahead and apply?
You can, but we have invested in very few India companies, and I don't think we are going to kind of try to continue because we're trying to have some kind of geographical focus. So we always take a look. You could tempt us, but I feel like if you're ready to go and you kind of have everything, just do it. But like if you're going to do a bunch of work, maybe not worth it.
No, my application is ready. I just need to click submit.
Okay.
So yeah.
We look forward to seeing the application, Rashmi.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this next question. Is marketing a thing you learn by taking a course or master's degree if you want to become an entrepreneur, or is it better to start with startups right away?
Oh, gosh. I guess I will caveat and be like, there's lots of different ways to learn, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost always better to start a startup right away. Almost always, especially if it's like you're taking college courses. Here's the trick to figure out whether the course is going to be useful or not. If it is primarily created by somebody who has never been an entrepreneur before, it will probably be useless and a waste of your time and money. If it was created by somebody who has, then maybe it's kind of okay. But all of the really good courses on how to be an entrepreneur, especially for startups and stuff, are freely available on the internet, including ours. And YC has a bunch and First Round has a bunch. And so I just don't think it makes any sense to be paying master's degree 2 years of kind of like college to learn stuff that is like free and kind of available and you can learn through experience. Take the money that it would cost to get a master's degree and put it into like your ideas and kind of like working on the validation, I think you're going to go way, way farther. So I'm sorry if people took these courses, but that's my advice, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Leszek. Just a quick follow-up. I'm really sorry, just for me to kind of understand. This is, again, my question. Sorry. Do you maybe have any materials on like the books about marketing? Because I'm just like, I'm starting out with
about
startups
marketing specifically.
Yeah. Because like, I just don't know where to start. Like, I mean, I have some time to read books. I like reading books, but why not? I could like read something useful, because I'm fine with starting startups and like taking action, but just like at least some theory might be there, right?
I don't have any kind of books right off the top of my head. But one place, and people aren't familiar with this, a course that could be helpful, Reforge is really good. So it's run by a friend of mine. It is run by all people who have like worked at startups, have like run startups and all that stuff. Reforge is super good. So maybe that's helpful to you. I don't have kind of like recommendations for marketing off the top of my head, but Reforge is super good. And so maybe there's stuff that you can kind of like dig into there on kind of like marketing and stuff. But I think when learning stuff, especially about startups, just pay attention to who's giving the advice, and I think you'll be in like reasonable shape.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hope it's helpful. This next one, is founder market fit really important for VC-backed startups?
Yes and no. And what I mean by that is it's really important depending on the startup idea. So like, for example, if you are working on nuclear fusion, it probably helps if you have like a degree in physics, and even better if you have like a PhD, and particularly in kind of like nuclear physics, right? Like probably makes sense. If you are working on stuff that is not deep tech as much, then it doesn't matter as much. People who like, I think a lot of times people say, hey, you know, a founder needs to have the problem themselves in order to kind of work on it. And like, that can get disproven kind of like very quickly if you just look down through kind of like a lot of founders and a lot of that kind of stuff. It helps to have the problem yourself and all of that kind of stuff, because it's just easier to understand the problem then. But like, if you're a good founder, you can kind of like learn enough about the problem and talk to people. You just have to spend more time into that. So I don't think it always matters. Some VCs care more about it than others, but it definitely doesn't matter as much as kind of like good validation and traction graphs that go up and to the right. You know, you can have a VC complain all they want about founder market fit, and then you show them your traction graph going up and to the right, and suddenly they don't care as much. So yes and no. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like if you have a problem you really want to work on, and you're like, oh, I'm not the absolute best person to work on this idea, don't worry about it too much.
All right, this next one. What do you see are good trends, problems that you see that no founders in Southeast Asia has developed a startup or solution for yet?
Okay. I want to answer this slightly differently. I actually think the biggest bottleneck for founders in Southeast Asia and what to kind of work on is actually execution, not the ideas. To me, like, there are tons of problems that exist in Southeast Asia for people to solve. There's like a ton. And, you know, you can look at other countries and bring those ideas over. You can just look at kind of within your countries and all that stuff. So I feel like problems actually are not the big thing in Southeast Asia. I feel like in the US, you have to like be very clever and find some problem that nobody else noticed. But in Southeast Asia, I feel like there's just problems everywhere. And so it's not as big of a thing. The trick ends up being that like there are less people, and I think it's just early and we're trying to kind of help with this, but people just don't know how to kind of work on the problems and kind of validate and execute on the problems as well. And so there's just like less problems kind of getting solved than we would like. I think there is actually, the thing that I would probably say is a lot of the problems being solved in Southeast Asia are probably being solved by people, if I'm being honest, in kind of like more privileged kind of socioeconomic classes in Southeast Asia. And so they're just more able to take some of the risk. They're probably more exposed to kind of other markets, and so they can bring those over. And I think a lot of the problems actually exist within kind of like maybe middle class and lower middle class parts of Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of problems there that I think probably should get solved. There's a reason why people care a lot about fintech, because I think, financial inclusion and credit and all this kind of stuff is still kind of just like woefully kind of like underdeveloped in Southeast Asia. And so we need to do a lot of work there. I mean, somebody was telling me some stat that like 70% of the Philippines has never had access to credit, even a credit card before. And it's like, that has to change. So there's a lot of problems kind of out there. But I think there's a lot of stuff that people are kind of thinking about. Maybe the only thing I'll add here is just, you don't have to work on cutting edge stuff in Southeast Asia. Like, you don't have to work on something that is like reliant on the like newest cutting edge LLM kind of like thing. Work on the stuff that is important to kind of the people around you and kind of in these markets and that kind of stuff. And you can solve them in kind of honestly ways that are like relatively simple, but just need to be done. And I think those are probably the best way. I think sometimes people get very excited about just like, I'm going to do this crypto AI thing. And it's like, well, you probably could just solve that with kind of like none of those things, right? So focus on solving the problems, focus on solving the problems of the people that are kind of like in your country and around you. And I think you'll be in pretty good shape.
All right, final two questions. This one I think we've already addressed. Does Iterative invest in companies HQ'd and based in Singapore, even though the market is global and not specifically Southeast Asia?
Yes, and one clarification I will make that people kind of ask me is, we don't actually really care where the company's domiciled. We sometimes have people from like Europe, and they're like, I'm willing to create an entity in Singapore. I'm like, yeah, I mean, anybody can create entities anywhere. We don't really care that much, right? And so again, the founders should be based in Southeast Asia, or they're targeting markets, or they're targeting Southeast Asia as a primary market. That's the way we kind of draw the line. So yeah.
Awesome. And then this last question is timely for us, Hsu Ken. We were just talking about this. I don't have a good idea now, but want to find a co-founder to partner with who already has an idea. Does Iterative do matchmaking for co-founders?
I don't know, Melissa. Does it? Should we? Melissa, you want to give them context?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about like how we want to invest our time in the next few months before the end of the year. And a co-founder matchmaking program is something that I know Hsu Ken has been wanting to do since we started Iterative, and we talked about it in more depth, like literally just a couple of days ago. We don't have a program yet. It is on our radar. We want to do it. We do see hunger for it. And so we do want to deliver on this, but we're just not sure on what the timing is. Anything you want to add there, Hsu Ken?
No, if more people are interested in this, let us know. This is something that we kind of like, we definitely want to work on. Maybe an observation for people. It's much harder to find a co-founder in Southeast Asia than it is in San Francisco. Like orders of magnitude. And so if you're kind of like struggling with this, like I can kind of understand why it's way harder here. So maybe there's something we can do to kind of like help out.
Yes. And then Samir also saying job page for iterative startups. That is also something that we are working on. So keep the ideas coming, because you're feeding us with ideas on things to do to help you all out as well.
Wow, we really are like, I mean, you guys are literally naming all kinds of stuff that like we internally have on our kind of like boards and project lists and stuff. So it's great. We want to work on these.
Awesome. Thank you all for spending the extra 30 minutes with us. Thanks, Hsu Ken, for spending the last hour and a half answering all these questions. I'll share this recording. We don't have any questions that we haven't answered, so we won't send anything out there, but you'll have the recording, you'll have all the material, and just look out for an email from me on Monday, and we'll start with validation modules 5 and 6 next week. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.